Today we're going to be learning about the 3-hatch opening in ZvT. This is a very simple, straightforward build that's going to allow us to power up our economy really heavily and go toe-to-toe with the Terran in the mid-game. This is very, very nice for newer players to learn just because it builds on a lot of those fundamentals, a lot of the basics of macro, and gets you used to a plethora of Zerg builds that you'll be trying to do in the future as well. So this is definitely one of the better builds learned, and especially very useful in ZvT, which is one of the more difficult, more mechanical matchups for Zerg. If you're a newer player and you struggle with mechanics, this can definitely help you improve very quickly. So let's go ahead and jump into a slideshow here. Why do we want to go for this build? Well, because it has been the gold standard since Savior. Savior technically didn't create a 3-hatch opening, but he definitely refined it to the point where a lot of people, even today, feel like it is the absolute standard of ZvT. Typically, you'll see in probably about 95% of the pro games that you see today, it's going to be a 3-hatch opening into that lair tech. So you're definitely going to see that quite a bit. The power of this build is that it allows you to just go ahead and build up tons and tons of drone, get that strong 2-base economy going, and then you're just going to be going into the mid-game with a very strong economy. You're going to be able to power up a lot of that lair tech. You're going to be able to blast out a ton of mutas or a ton of lurkers, and go ahead and take your 3rd base and transition very smoothly into that mid-game, into that late game. So very simply, the way that it works is we're going to be going for a very early expansion with minimal amounts of lings. And then once we have that expansion, we're going to go into a very robust production off of just 3 hatches. Going to get tons and tons of drones. And then we're going to go ahead and tech to lair. Now, once we have our lair units, the mutalists and the lurkers, then we can secure our 3rd base, which is going to allow us to go ahead and get enough gas for defilers, make sure that we can get a 4th base, and go ahead and transition into the late game. So here is our basic build order, and I've made a couple of noob-friendly adjustments. In this particular build, what I'm going to be talking about today, we're just going to be doing a 13 pool. This first adjustment, typically you can build an 11 to a 13 pool. It's kind of on a scale of safety, where the earlier pool is, the safer it is, but the more economically bad it is. We're going to be going for the least safe but most economical pool, which is going to be on 13. The only reason why you would get earlier ones, though, is just to make sure that you're safe from bunker rushes. If you're not used to dealing with bunker rushes, it's fine. You can go ahead and scale back if you're feeling a little bit nervous about playing against bunker rushes, but only do it after you lose. Otherwise, you should definitely play as economic as possible in the early game to try to go ahead and boost your economy, make sure all your timings line up a little bit better going into that mid-game. Our second adjustment is going to be the safety sunken that I've added at 24. This just allows you to go ahead and get up an early sunken for early defense. The only real reason why you need this sunken is just to deal with early marine pressures, and if your opponent went for an early factory, which isn't that difficult to scout out and actually respond to. But since we're fairly new to this game, since we're noobs here, we're just going to go ahead and put down this blind safety sunken. It's going to allow us to defend versus those things and also deny scouting going into the lair tag. So it's definitely a good thing for you to do. The third adjustment is going to be Spire plus Hydrogen at the lair. Typically, you go for one or the other and just drill really hard into that. This build is going to allow us to go ahead and focus on whichever one we want. It allows us to put both of them down and choose either Mutalists or Lurkers as an option, and then we can move on from there. And it also forces our opponent to respond to it in whichever way possible. At the highest levels, this is not quite as powerful, but in lower levels, this is very, very strong because it just allows us to kind of pivot on the spot if we need to, if we see our opponents going for something in particular. It also just allows us to put pressure on our opponent, force them to start making decisions based on what they're scouting. So our big convergence point, if you ever get lost, you don't know where you are, Either, you know, some sort of bunker rush happens, or a small marine attack comes in, you lose 6 drones, you have no idea what's going on, you forget a gas or something, or you go up to like, you accidentally go up to like 4 hatches because you forget that gas, etc. It's fine. So as long as we get back to this convergent point, it's going to be off of 2 bases. We're going to have 3 hatches and 2 gas. We're going to have 2 sunkens at the front. And then our units, we're going to have a control group of lings, preferably somewhere out on the map. And then our lair tech, either mutas or lurkers. If we have all of that, we can go ahead and transition into a 3rd base and move on into the mid-late game. Don't get caught up in all the details. Just make sure that you reach this point and then take a 3rd base. Easy peasy. Our divergence points, places where we diverge from our normal build order, we only really have 2 conditions here. Technically there's a 3rd, which I'll talk about in a second. But our first condition is going to be, if there's a bunker rush, we're going to pull our drones and make sure that we're buying time for our lings, staving off this bunker rush. Very straightforward, but it does mean that your build order is going to get a little bit skewed. It's going to take you a little bit while to actually get back into that groove. Not a big deal though, as long as you just remember your convergence point. The second deviation is going to be, if there's no natural expansion for the Terran, we're going to build a sunken and tech to hydras first. Well, you know what? We already built that safety sunken, so that's good. And then we just have to worry about teching to hydras, making sure that we have a couple hydras to defend not only from vultures, but from wraiths or any sort of drop play that might come in. As well as there's a possibility for a 3 barracks mass bioplay to be coming out, and we can always just transition very smoothly into lurkers from there. So very nicely done. The 3rd one, which I actually forgot to put up here, is you can sometimes go for speed first instead of your lair. If you go for Zergling speed first, you can make a ton of Zerglings and try to bust the natural, but it's a lot riskier and not quite as safe as just going for that fast lair. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the build, try to explain things in depth, and show you guys some of these relative timestamps that you can think of in order to remember when to get things, rather than just memorizing a bunch of numbers and things like that. So let us go into this. It's going to be on Fighting Spirit. That was terrible. That was a terrible split. Oh my gosh, it was awful. We'll live though. We'll live. So our first Overlord is going to go ahead and head towards the closest natural, rather. And the closest natural on Fighting Spirit is going to always be in a clockwise position. We just send it out that way. Our first 2 Overlords are mainly just designed to get out on the map and get into a position where we can scout out our opponent later. It's very map specific, but it just requires you to think ahead to really study the maps and look at them and realize why you're putting Overlords where there are abusable spaces where Overlords can just kind of sit. And most modern maps do have these abusable spaces where you can kind of sit an Overlord over the natural expansion and kind of look for scouting going out, look for whether or not the expansion has gone down, etc., etc. So we droned up to 9, we built an Overlord. And once this Overlord finishes, we're going to be building 3 drones and going to be building an expansion on 12. At the same time that we build that expansion, we're also going to be scouting. So you'll see that I send 2 drones out at the same time. This Overlord's just going to kind of go cross map. Like I said, it's mostly just going to be trying to get in position to go ahead and get over to that other base. So here go our first drones out. One of them is going to go scout in the opposite direction of our Overlord. I'm going to go ahead and replace those minerals with that. And then we're going to build our hatch right over here. Pretty much on time. Going to continue building drones up to 13. So I've got my hatch hotkeyed and my camera location hotkeyed, so I can jump to that very easily. We're going to build our spawning pool on 13. Keeping an eye on this drone on the mini-map, so that if it walks up there into a couple Marines, I can quickly pull it back. Yeah, there it is. Good call by me. Let's because for the past 2 demonstrations that I've done, it's messed up. So this Overlord's going to take the long way around and just get in position over there. We're going to continue droning up to 15, which is when we're going to build our third hatchery. This is usually the time that a bunker rush could come in. You just got to keep an eye out on your natural, make sure nothing is sneakily building over there. Otherwise, you're in good shape. So we're going to go ahead and build our hatchery here. We're going to build it a little bit further away from our other ones, just so that it forces our opponent to scan a little bit later. This first drone out here is going to be building that. I'm going to transfer a couple of drones over here, and these 2 larvae are going to be turning into lings. So there we have it. Now we're up to 16. So our next larva that comes out, which is going to be from our natural expansion, is going to be an Overlord. Easy peasy. I was actually a little bit too good with that. Alright, so Ling's going to be going out. Usually these Lings are just going to be chasing down an annoying SCV that's scouting in your base. If the SCV leaves your base, go ahead and just park them at the ramp. Make sure the SCV can't walk back up. At this point, we're just going to be waiting for our gas to reach 100. Once it gets 100, we're going to go for a layer first. Like I said, sometimes you can change this around a bit. Go for link speed first, but in this particular case, we're just going to go for the layer first, because it allows us to feel a little bit more comfortable going into the later stages of the game. Once we get that second, we're going to get our Zergling speed, and we're also going to build a natural hatch at the same time. Go ahead and build that as well. And build our Overlord. So we're doing good at this point. We're just going to chill out. We're going to drone up to 27. And as soon as this Overlord pops up, that's going to allow us to go ahead and go into the rest of our build. Our layer is about to complete. So just a quick moment to just recap. We are waiting on that one Overlord. As soon as that pops, we're going to make 3 to 5 Lings, whichever gives us a full subgroup of Lings. And as soon as our layer pops, we're going to put down our Hydralistin and our Spire at the same time. So just wanted to quickly recap that. So there's our layer. We're going to go ahead and just pop down this stuff immediately. And we're just going to be droning up to 35. At that point, we're going to work on changing everything else out, and we'll be in good shape. So, rallying everything over here. We're going to go ahead and start that. We'll start our research right over there as well. Here's our full subgroup of Lings. And then basically these Lings are just going to go hang out in front of the natural and just hang out. We're going to build 2 more Overlords after this. And then just get ready for this attack to come in. And when it does come in, that's when we're going to morph these creep colonies into Sunkens. So that is basically our build. At this point in time, instead of going... I take that back. If you want to go heavily into Butas, you can just skip the Lurker upgrade. But since we're noobs, I think it's a good idea for you to go ahead and get it anyway. Just allows you to comfortably go into this mid-game. The Terran timing attack versus the computer comes in at about the same time that it would in a normal game. Maybe a little bit earlier, since it is a 1-base attack. But you can kind of practice against this timing. As long as you have 3 Sunkens over here and a couple of Lings, you're going to be fine. You can defend versus that pressure. And it gives you a good timestamp for what time you're supposed to have everything out. So that's going to be it. I hope you guys feel comfortable with that build. Just practice it a couple times versus the AI until you get comfortable with it. And pretty soon you'll be slamming Terrans in the ZvT matchup. See you later, guys.